Great morning, family. I hope all is well. I am Tanya Brooks, your FBA Community Folk Herbalist. And, first of all, I hope everybody had a great night. I hope everybody's having a great morning. We're supposed to have another great day today here in my part of Connecticut. Allergy season is in full effect. My son's sniffing and all of that stuff. So, but this morning I'm going to talk about a subject or a life lesson that everyone has or at some point in their life will experience and have to deal with. And I personally have had a lot of experience with this life lesson. And the life lesson or this life lesson is grief. It is grief and grieving. And so I'm going to title this, because I was thinking about how do I title this? The title of this morning's live is going to be Grieve, yes, but don't allow grief to destroy your life. Grieve, yes, but don't allow grieving to destroy your life. Right? And the examples, as always, are going to be personal examples, my life. But I want to give like a definition, and this is not a textbook definition. This is Tanya's definition of grief. And grief is living with the death of something, right? Because it's not always the death. The majority of the time, yes, it is dealing with the death of a loved one, right? But it is, my definition is grief or grieving is dealing with the death of something. Because you can grieve, obviously, the death of a loved one, or you will grieve the death of a loved one or someone that you know. But you will also grieve the death of a relationship, right? Because when a relationship ends, rather it be the relationship that you had with your significant other, rather it be the ending of the death of a friendship, a pet, you're dealing with the death of something and or someone. But don't allow your grieving to destroy or to kill your life that you are currently living. But I think it's very important also that you allow yourself to grieve in the way in which you do, right? And everyone's grieving will look entirely different than the other person. You both can have experienced the loss of a parent, you and your siblings, but your grieving looks and will be different. And don't allow anyone to tell you, well, you should be beyond that by now. You need to stop grieving and all of that, because again, everyone's experience of the death of someone or something is different. So don't allow that to happen. So I'm going to use the fact or the example two examples personally of my grieving three very important people in my life, and how I dealt with it and am dealing with it, but now not allowing it to destroy my current living life. And that is, my mother passed when my mother transitioned, and I like to use the word transition, not passed, right? My mother transitioned in 1997. I was 25. My father, my brother, and I'm doing it in the order in which they transitioned. My brother transitioned in 2007. I was 35. And then my father transitioned in 2012, and I was 39. No, I was 40. I was 40 because I had Hannah at 41, and Hannah was born in 2013, so I was 40. And Zeke, have a good day. Remember, you got track practice. Love you. Talking about grieving, but not allowing it to destroy you. And I remember saying to myself as a young woman concerning my mother, when she was still alive here on earth, I remember saying to myself, if my mother ever died, yo, I'm gonna die. Like, I can't see myself living without my mother. And this is well before I knew she was sick. But, you know, I would just have conversation with people, you know, about the close relationship that I had with my mother. My mother was my best friend. So now, not only am I talking about the loss of a life, but I'm also talking about the loss or the death of a relationship. Because again, my mother was not just my mother, but she was my best friend. And I remember about maybe a month after my mother had transitioned, and I didn't realize at that time that prior to my mother transitioning, I had spoken the words, yo, I don't know what I would ever do if my mother died. I would kill myself. Like, I didn't say I would kill myself. I said, I don't know, I wouldn't be able to keep on living. And at my mother's funeral, my brother and I were sitting, my brother, myself, my dad, we were, of course, you know, in the front row at the funeral. And I remember not crying. I had my sunglasses on, I wasn't crying. And then when a good friend of mine at the time got up and she sang a song that was one of my favorite songs, and she sang, and when she sang that song, I broke a little. I didn't completely break, but I broke a little bit, meaning I broke down. I started crying, right? Because not only was that one of my favorite songs, but that was one of my mother's favorite songs. And I remember waking up in our home on Sunday mornings, because on Sundays, you know, my mother would play gospel music, right, as she was preparing Sunday dinner and breakfast and all that stuff. And I broke. And I broke because as my friend sang that song, I realized that death, that physical death of my mother had taken place. That relationship, the song reminded me that relationship, that was done. That was done. It was never going to happen like that again. My mother would never be playing that song on that Sunday morning, right? Even though I had my mother's physical body in front of me, I hadn't broke. But when my friend sung that song, I had broke. But that was me starting to grieve, because that was the death of a relationship. The song sparked that. So I'm going to keep going, because this can be pretty long, right? I'm starting to grieve. And so about a month after my mother's funeral, I remember, and I was really going through. I was also in a relationship that was also coming to an end, a death, right? And I remember that month, like, saying to myself, I can't go on. Like, what am I going to do? You know, I used to speak to my mother every single day, and we did something together almost every single weekend, and we would get my brother's boys, and actually my brother's youngest son was only he was like a month old when my mom had passed, you know, when she had transitioned. And so I was just like, oh my goodness. And I remember at the time I had a Jeep Wrangler. I remember driving down the street and saying to myself, if I just go top speed. So now I'm talking about grieving, right? But not allowing grieving to destroy you, to kill you. I was driving down the street, top speed, and I remember seeing this building in a brick wall, and I said, if I just, you know, slam into it, I had a Jeep Wrangler with the rag top, I said, I'll get projected. And then, you know, with Jeep Wranglers, the windows, the front window folds down. I said, I'll propel. I took my seatbelt off. I said, I'll propel into the building, and then that'll just be it, the end of it for me. And I'll be good. And then a voice, an audible voice, said, no. Just pull over and just scream. Release all of that you're feeling, that you've been dealing with. And that's what I did. I pulled over in the same parking lot facing the building side that I was planning on smashing into. I've never revealed this publicly, but I need to, right? And I screamed. I screamed. And it was like, as I screamed, my voice and the grief was just literally just leaving and leaving and leaving. The death, the passing was just leaving my soul, because it was like different echoes of death, and my voice was like, it was like different dimensions, but it was literally death just leaving my body. I don't know how long I was screaming, but it was for a long time, because when I had finished, I was just sweating and I was just a shaking mess, and I just burst it out and I sobbed. Right? But look at how grief would have taken me out if I allowed it. Yes, we grieve, but we do not grieve to the point where we allow grief to destroy our living life. I'm going to give you one other example of how grief can travel, and it can, if not dealt with properly, it can destroy you as you're living. And that example is of my father. And I don't think a lot of people have spoken about this and have explained it, but I'm grateful that this has been revealed to me concerning grief, undealt grief, and how it will destroy your living life. So my father's mother, my grandmother, was a young unwed mother. And I only speak about that is because she, back in 1944, when my dad was born, she got pregnant by a man who was much older than her, and they were not married. He was actually married to another woman. And, you know, back then, if you got pregnant and you were unwed, what did they do? They sent you away. So my grandmother got pregnant with my dad by a man who was married. She was young. She was 21. And the man, my grandfather, was 35, 36. And they sent her away. Now, my dad was conceived in North Carolina. And when she started showing, they sent her away. And they sent her away to our family members in Detroit. And my grandmother got very ill while she was carrying my father. I'm dealing with undealt grief and how it will destroy your living life. So my grandmother caught pneumonia really bad. And so she gave birth to my dad, and she died. 6 hours after she had given birth to my father. And she died from the pneumonia, but she also died from the childbirth. Of course, she wasn't getting the proper medical care because, again, she was sent away, and, you know, it wasn't an honorable pregnancy. So she got ill. So the medical treatment she probably would have gotten had she not been sent away, she did not get. And so she succumbed to childbirth, but also pneumonia. And my father was actually born July 21st. And he did not find this out until he was in his 60s. And what happened basically was he stayed with the family in Detroit until my great-grandmother, my mother's mother, my grandmother's mother, sent for him about, I think he said, September of the same year he was born. So she sent him, they came and they got him from North Carolina, and they didn't want him. His own grandmother didn't want him, and she didn't want him because he was dark complected. You know, he was chocolate. So my father was raised by his uncle and his wife. So now my father is dealing with grief as a baby, and he does not even know it. He is grieving. One, there is no way a child is in a mother's womb for 9 months and that child's mother succumbs to childbirth, and that happens a lot. There's no way that that child has not taken on that energy of grieving. So my father is now grieving as an infant his own mother's death. He is grieving the rejection from his family members. He is grieving the death of his own maternal grandmother not wanting him because of his skin complexion, but also the fact in which her daughter conceived my father. And so let me just kind of wrap this up because I'm already on 20-something minutes. So as my father matured and grew into a young man, he grieved. He grieved not knowing his mother. He grieved his mother's death and his being brought forth in life. He has grieved not knowing who his father is because no one ever spoke of it. He is grieving living in a town where he is being raised by his uncle and his aunt, and his maternal grandmother does not want him, and no one speaks because he's now back in the town and when he was conceived. So he is grieving all of these life issues. And so, yes, he and my mom, they meet, and they do not get married when my brother is conceived. They don't get married until I am conceived. And so they get married after 5.5, 6 years, right? When my mother finds out she's pregnant with me, my parents get married for their reasons. But my father is still grieving. And in his grieving, he has become very abusive to my mother. This is what grief can look like in life as you are killing your current living life. And so because of that grief, he's become very abusive to his wife, the mother of his children. He's become abusive to himself with the alcohol abuse. Do you understand what I'm saying? You understand where I'm going with this? And he is grieving because he is now, a man that is very unfaithful to his family as well. He conceived another child while married to my mother. And these are all extensions of how grief or grieving can kill your current living life if it is not dealt with. Okay, so family, listen, I could go on, I can extend this, but I'm going to stop. You just remember, grieve, yes. Everyone has to grieve with dealing with the passing or the death of a relationship, a person, a situation. But bye, Mama, love you.
Mom, why did you not give my doggy down?
I forgot, I'm sorry. But do not allow yourself to grieve to where it is destroying your current life. All right, family, remember, as always, remember, be great to yourself because you are great. Be great to your family. Be great to your community. Without love, self-love first, we have absolutely nothing. And as always, clarity is key, but without consistency, we have no balance. Family, be well.